Hi, my name is Elliott Greenblott, and I'm called Mr. Scammer. I'm the Vermont coordinator for AARP's Fraud Watch, and today we're going to be taking a look at scams, and in particular, whether you're ready to deal with them. So today's exercise is a short quiz. I'm going to ask you to get a pen or pencil and a small piece of paper. We're going to do a 7-question quiz today on whether or not you are an easy target for con artists. And if you're ready, we'll start now. Question number 1, clicking on pop-up ads. And you have a choice of 2 answers. A, is a safe way to explore new websites, or B, can lead you to a potentially unsafe website. That's question number 1. Question number 2, opening an email from an unknown sender. A, is a good way to meet new people. B, could be a scam. C, could expose your computer to viruses or malware. Or D, both B and C. I'll reread those answers. A, is a good way to meet new people. B, could be a scam. And C, could expose your computer to viruses or malware. Or D, both the last 2. Question number 3. What is the potential danger of selling merchandise through an online auction site? A, you might not get paid. B, you might not be able to sell your item. C, you might have to pay for shipping. Again, what is the potential danger for selling merchandise through an internet or online website? A, you might not get paid. B, you might not be able to sell your item. C, you might have to pay for shipping. Question number 4. If you use an online payment transfer site for paying bills or for making purchases, it is better to, 1 of 2 answers. First one, use multiple online payment sites for different purposes. Or B, to use only one site for your transactions. Our next question, number 5, responding to an online job posting that seems to be too good to be true can make you a fraudster's target. True or false? Number 6, when a website has a privacy policy or terms of service agreement, it means the site will not share my information with other websites or companies. True or false? And the final question in this quiz, banks sometimes send emails asking customers to click on a link to verify personal information. True or false? Again, banks sometimes send emails asking customers to click on a link to verify personal information. Now that we've completed the quiz, let's see how your score is on it. And as we deal with the answers, I'm going to try and add a little bit of extra information. So the first question was clicking on pop-up ads, and the correct answer is can lead you to a potentially unsafe website. Pop-ups are not regulated by anybody. And as a result, a scammer can very easily sneak in pop-up ads that look very legitimate and are really there to trick you or to con you. So when you get those pop-ups, the best thing to do is to ignore them, close them, or better yet, use the software in your web browser to disable pop-up windows. Now you're going to find that that could be annoying because some websites that you may visit require that you take pop-ups from them, but you can always reestablish it and then close it off afterwards. Second question. Opening an email from an unknown sender will do two things. It could set you up for a scam, and it also could end up causing your computer to be attacked by viruses or other types of malware. Whenever you get an email from someone you don't know, it's best to let that email go into the trash or not open it, and certainly not click on any links or any attachments. Even if that email is coming from what looks like a reputable company, the best bet is always let that email go. The offer would not be all that great. And also look for some hints or clues, such as the email is addressed to undisclosed recipients rather than to you directly. Those deals and those special offers tend to be things that are designed to trap you. Our third question, what is the potential danger of selling merchandise through an online auction site? And the danger is that it could very easily be a scam, and you might end up having to lose money or not get paid for the item that you're trying to sell. So, for example, somebody makes a bid on the item you're selling, you send that item to them, and you find that either the account that they gave you or the reference they gave you for payment is not going to provide any money to you. So the best thing to do is be sure you're working with legitimate online sites that have some form of guarantee to at least keep you safe from being victimized on their website. The next question was, if you use an online payment transfer site for paying bills or for making purchases, it is always better to only use one payment site. Trying to spread those things out across several credit cards or several locations can be confusing to anybody, but also it's very hard to track scams or problems if you don't have good tracking on those items. And the best way to have good tracking is simply create one account or establish one account that you use for the online activities. Responding to an online job posting that seems to be too good to be true could very well put you in the hands of a con artist. What you're looking at right now is an example of one of these emails. If you follow along with me, you can see that it has a from and gives the name of Vasily P. Bagat. It tells you what time, tells you the date. This one came to me, and it also has some very official-looking reference number that's printed out. And then the author of the email says, "Good morning," tells me about his company, describes what the benefits are for going for this job, and then a little bit about the job purpose and skills and requirements. Looks fairly normal for an employment offer, but there are some things that cause me and should cause you to hesitate before responding. If we look at the top of this email, we'll see that the address for the return email is vasily.p.bagat11@gmail.com. Corporations, government offices do not use open email accounts such as Gmail, Hotmail, Ymail. So if you see something from Yahoo or Gmail and it's coming with an offer like this, that would be a sure sign that there's a problem. Another problem here, if you notice the date and time. It says 5:29 p.m. EDT, Eastern Daylight Time. But if you look at the first paragraph, it starts off with good morning. That's a quick indicator that whoever was sending this at the time that they were sending it, it was morning, which would put them about halfway around the world. So we're probably talking about an email that originated somewhere in East Asia. If we go down that first paragraph a little bit more, you can see what the pay rate is, a fairly attractive $85,000 to $87,000 a year. That sounds pretty decent. And now if we go down to the bottom of the page, you can see that there's another email address. In this case, it's at yahoo.com. Again, something that a corporation would not use. It would be, if this happened to be Microsoft, it would be Microsoft.com. If it was from a government agency like the Federal Trade Commission, it would be ftc.gov. They simply do not use Yahoo or Gmail. And then at the bottom, the notice that says, note, only people with resume will be contacted. Going offline or out of the mainstream to make a job offer without going to, let's say, one of the typical job offer sites like monster.com puts you at risk to start with. But in this case, we know pretty well that this is a risky situation because of the indications that I already gave you, but also because sending a resume can be a very dangerous thing, considering what is on a resume. Personal, biographical information, job history, variety of other things. So staying away from this kind of job offer becomes very critical. We have one other question or two to respond to. When a website has privacy policy or terms of service agreement, it means the site will not share my information with other websites or companies. The answer there is false. It has nothing to do with what's shared and what isn't shared, other than to say, this is what we share and this is what we don't share. So it's very likely that in those several pages of details that nobody ever reads, there will be something that tells you we share this information with, or we sell it, or we do something with it beyond just keeping it for ourselves to use. Final question. Banks sometimes send emails asking customers to click on a link to verify personal information. Banks don't do that. Banks will ask you to contact them, and they may provide you with a number, but quite typically they will say something to the effect that please contact us through your regular approach. Banks will not ask you to verify information online. And in particular, when you get one of these notices, the thing to do is to, again, as in an earlier situation, check what the address is in that address line at the top of the web page. If it doesn't have the name of that company or bank, such as peoplesunited.com, it's probably, again, a scam. So we've looked at 7 questions. Hopefully you've done well. Let's see how you did. If you want to score this, count up the number of wrong answers that you have. If you have 1 or more wrong answers, you've failed this test. I know it sounds a little strange, but keep in mind that this is a test to see if you're a potential victim. And if you fail on any one of these questions, that opens you up to becoming definitely a victim of fraud and scams. Thank you. We're going to take a quick look at investment fraud today. And our look is going to be some of the cautions and some of the problems that you might run into dealing with your own investments or those investments that you cover for people who are family members or friends. So let's jump into this. First of all, I'm going to say that you need to look for the warning signs. There are several of them, and they're things that individuals who are making financial offers will often put in front of you. For example, they may say, your profit is guaranteed. We know that profit is not guaranteed, that the market has dips and it has boom times, and being able to say that it's a guarantee is a statement that can't really be made. Second red flag or concern is when the person offering you the opportunity to invest says, it's an amazing high rate of interest in return. Again, that's something that can't be guaranteed. Very similarly, you can't guarantee the issue of risk. If the vendor says there is no risk, believe it that there most likely is a risk and that the risk can be substantial. And it could even be 100% of the investment that you're making. You can get in on the ground floor. Somebody had to start off that investment, and getting in on the ground floor is not what you do when someone approaches you later and says, you can get in on the ground floor. It's already been established. Beware of that statement. If the person making the offer says this is only available today, I would say run away, don't walk away from the offer, because timeliness is important, but in this case, a deadline for making the investment and doing it on one day specifically can lead you down the wrong road. It's a secret investment is something that I've heard. The tip is just for you. If you think about that for a minute or two, you'll suddenly realize that there's no such thing as just a secret investment, that the individual offering it is not going to gain by only approaching you. So most likely that person is trying to convince you to buy something with a promise that is not true. Another one is, I'll get the paperwork to you later. If the individual doesn't have the paperwork with them and doesn't sign it and you haven't signed it, then the paperwork doesn't mean anything. And if you provide that person with money or a link to an account, then you're definitely at risk. And finally, if the individual says, just make the check out to me, again, run away, don't walk away. Brokers and investment advisors will not ask you to do that. They will give you the name of a company that should be involved in the transaction. Secondly, our second clue in terms of investment fraud, and by the way, some people will say, I really don't have any investments, but quite often you do, and you may not even realize it. It could be as simple as a bank account that you've been building for several years. It could also be something that was given to you. It could be stocks or bonds. Even things like U.S. savings bonds are investments. And when they mature, that money needs to go somewhere. Most likely, that would be in some other form of investment. So our second recommendation is check all the investment products that you're going to deal with. Contact your regulator. There are several of them, as you can see, at least two of them, and one of them is at a national level. But in Vermont, we're very lucky because the Vermont Department of Financial Regulation will provide advice or information about a particular investment. So if the investment is something that, for example, has been proven to be fraudulent, they will be able to tell you that. They won't advise you to the level of saying you should put your money in this particular investment or in another one that are legitimate investments, but it's very important that you contact them to say, is this investment that I'm considering something that has been cleared by the state of Vermont. Every investment vehicle, every stock, every bond has to be registered with the state of Vermont for investment. If it's not registered with our Department of Financial Regulation, don't invest. If you're not living in Vermont, every state has a similar organization. So check with your state government, check on the website, call an information line, and I'm sure you'd be able to find what the status is on that particular intent that you have. Our third recommendation, check the person. Now in Vermont, an investment broker is required to be registered with the Department of Financial Regulation, and those records are available to consumers. So you can either check that online by going to the website for the Vermont Department of Financial Regulation, or you can call them and ask them, give them the name of the individual, tell them what you're dealing with, and they can tell you whether or not the person is registered or not with the state. There's also an organization called FINRA, which is a national financial watchdog. They track investors. Many of these investors will be registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission, so going to them and checking their website might have some additional information that you can find. My fourth suggestion today is that you check the fit. And what the fit means is looking at the investment and looking at you, looking at your lifestyle, looking at the needs that you have, the desires that you have, your age, looking at the members of your family that might be involved, and deciding if that particular investment is something that fits your needs and your desires. If it doesn't, there are probably some things that will. But in the case of these investments, I would say the best thing to do is, if it doesn't fit, don't take the offer. If it does fit, make sure that the offer and that the fit is exactly right for you. There's no need to rush this process. It's a matter of saving your money and being aware that con artists are always out there looking for a way to get in your pockets. Thank you. U.S. Census Bureau is about ready to undertake its major activity that takes place every 10 years, the decennial census. This year, the census will begin in the month of March, and the key date is going to be April 1st. Just as with most other financial and regulatory activities that take place, the Census Bureau has to deal with impersonators, scammers, fraudsters. These are individuals who will come out and impersonate a census worker and try to get information from you. It's called phishing, but this is one-to-one phishing, where the individual who's trying to impersonate will walk up to you and ask you a number of questions. If you're approached in person at your door by an individual who claims to be a U.S. Census worker, it's very easy to check to see if they are legitimate. First of all, you can say, I cannot speak to you now, please come back. As far as the U.S. Census is concerned, they will do that. They will come back. They'll set an appointment date with you, and you can talk to them at your convenience. So anybody who starts off by saying, well, I need to do this now, and I can't delay it, and this is part of the law, and if you don't do it, you will be arrested, that's a scam, so beware of it. Census workers carry an identification tag. The card usually has their picture on it, but it also has two other pieces of information that are very critical. One of them is a watermark that has the name of the United States Department of Commerce. That's the federal agency that oversees the Census Bureau. So it should show that watermark on the ID. Secondly, the ID will carry an expiration date, most likely sometime in the month of June. The expiration date shows up, and if an individual doesn't have the expiration date on their ID card, you'll know right away that this is fraud. So what do you do if you either experience the fraud or you're not sure? There are a couple things you can do very quickly. You can contact the Census Bureau, and that would be the number that you see, 1-800-923-8282, or the New York Regional Office, which oversees Vermont and other areas in the Northeast, and that is the 800-991-2520. So what happens if you get the call or an email from the Census Bureau asking you for information? If it's from the Census Bureau, the email address and the website will very clearly have census.gov. That's the official address of the U.S. Census Bureau. If it doesn't show that, but has some other name or some combination of letters that aren't really readable, then it's immediately clear to me, and it should be to you, we're dealing with somebody who's trying to steal information. Census Bureau is not going to ask for certain things. For example, they're not going to ask you for your full Social Security number. They're not going to ask you for money. They're not going to ask you for a donation. They're not going to threaten you with arrest. They're not going to tell you that they're working for a political party or working for a candidate or a current politician. And they're not going to ask you for something like your mother's maiden name. If you get any of those, or a request for a credit card number or an account number at a bank or investment firm, then that, again, is a sure sign that we're dealing with fraud and a scam. The best thing to do if you encounter that is go to the U.S. Census Bureau phone number, call it, go to the web address, and fill out one of the inquiry and complaint forms that they have at the uscensus.gov website. So those are a few things to be aware of. It's important that you complete census questionnaires. The questionnaires provide a lot of information to government agencies and also to private organizations and nonprofits. That information determines, in part, what happens with some federal grant money. So ignoring the census may result in an undercount for your state, and as a result, a reduction in the amount of money that the federal government provides to the state. So participating in the census is important. It actually is something that is required by law. But nobody will come and put handcuffs on you because you don't participate. It's just a good policy that people do it and that they answer as many of the questions as they feel comfortable to answer. New Year's resolutions. We all make them. We all struggle with them. Probably the reason why we have so much difficulty is that we spend a lot of time setting our resolutions for the next year, such as I'm going to lose weight, or I'm going to take life easier, or whatever it happens to be for you. And somewhere around the 10th of January, certainly by this point of the year, we've either forgotten what our resolutions are, or we've decided unreachable, not going to make it. I'm going to give you some resolutions, 4 specific ones, that you can make and that you can keep because they all require that you do them very quickly. So they are efforts that you do now and you don't have to do again, or at worst, you have to do again next year. So let's take a look at my 4 resolutions for 2020. First resolution, which a lot of people question, is register for the Do Not Call list. Many people will say it's kind of worthless because I still get many fraudulent or scam calls. That may be true, but there are some things that happen that make your feeling not true. As with almost any law, the Do Not Call law has people who comply with it and people who violate it. It's no different than, let's say, a speed limit law on a Vermont or federal highway anywhere. So what is it with the Do Not Call list that creates some problems? Well, there are some issues as far as who makes the illegal calls. First of all, any charity, political organization, or governmental body has the right to make calls. It has the right to call you, even though you may not appreciate their calls. So when you get a call from, let's say, the American Cancer Society, or you get a call from some other organization that you've donated money to, that's a legitimate call, and the best thing to do if you don't want to get calls from them is to request it. Just say, please don't call me again. Most often, these folks will not call you. On the other side of the coin, there are the illegal calls, and they're done by 2 groups of people. One group is what I'll call the criminal element, and the other group is non-criminal. The criminal element generally doesn't care because they use a variety of techniques that make it almost impossible to have their telephone calls traced. So making the calls, such as the one about consolidating your credit cards or the free vacation that's being offered, quite often those people are con artists and that's their business. They will most likely not be caught because they use techniques that prevent discovery. The other group of people that are violators are legitimate businesses. Sometimes a legitimate business will start making phone calls on a telephone list and not realize that it's breaking the law. In other cases, it's willful on their part in a search to get customers. The Do Not Call list is supervised by the Federal Trade Commission, and the FTC does not take violations of this law as something that is ordinary and shouldn't be dealt with. In fact, they pursue the companies that are using this law, are violating the law, and an individual or a company that does will end up being fined for every violation. So if they make 10,000 phone calls, they will be fined for 10,000 different fines. So it can be a very stiff situation. Last year, those people who chose to violate the Do Not Call regulation, and they were legitimate businesses, paid over $121 million in penalties to the U.S. government. Also, Dish Network, which tried to get subscribers by calling everybody that they could, violated the Do Not Call list several times, enough to generate a $280 million penalty. So just taking into consideration those 2 issues, we have over $400 million that was collected by the U.S. government for violation of Do Not Call. So when people say it's worthless, it's not worthless. It is a valuable tool in trying to prevent some of the calls. If you get a call, call the Federal Trade Commission. Their number's on the screen, or go to their website. Go to the donotcall.gov website and register a complaint. New Year's resolutions. Resolution number 2. Register for credit freezes. I've said this a number of times in other programs, and I write it constantly in my newspaper column. Credit freezes are ways to prevent direct assault by con artists on your credit and on your information. Identity theft becomes very difficult if you have a credit freeze. A credit freeze basically tells the credit bureau that you don't want your information shared with anyone. You're locking your credit account. That means that if a bank, automobile dealer, loan agent attempts to find information about you, particularly information about your financial history and your financial record, they can't get it from the credit bureau. And as a result, they cannot authorize or permit people to take out loans or borrow money. Now, the freeze does not impact you as a user. At least it doesn't impact your daily activity. So if you have a loan, sorry, you still have to pay it. If you have credit cards, you can still use them and you can still pay off bills and purchase items. So it doesn't affect your daily life, your daily work. What it will affect is whether or not you need to borrow money. If you need to borrow money or you plan on leasing a car, those companies need to have a credit review because they're going to assess what your risk is to determine if the risk is warranted and they can loan you the money. So if you have a credit freeze in place and you plan on borrowing money or getting a car lease, you'll need to thaw out your credit report. And that's a simple process where you contact the credit bureau, you tell them that you need to have your credit information accessed, they open up the credit report for a short period of time or for a specific purpose, and then it's frozen again. Credit freezes are free. You do not have to pay anything. Up to a couple of years ago, you had to pay on some of them. Others were free. They're all free today. And the credit report also can be refrozen free and thawed free. So the activity becomes just something that you need to be aware of, and it is very important to get those freezes. Who should get them? Basically everyone. So even if you have minor children, you should be getting a credit freeze for them. You can obtain that for almost all children, but you may have to find some issue that allows you to take over your child's identity for this, and it may require permission from either that organization that you're working with or from the credit bureau itself. But credit freezes are extremely important, so be sure to get them. New Year's resolutions and resolutions that you can do immediately and not have to worry about for the rest of the year. Number one recommendation when you're dealing with computers and when you're dealing with technology is that there are a few things that are critical. The first one is that you need to make sure that the operating system on your technology is up to date. A number of people have gotten into the habit of using old software. For example, up until very recently, about 20% of the American population had their PCs using Microsoft Windows XP. The XP software was developed over 20 years ago. And in that amount of time, many changes have taken place, as far as Microsoft is concerned, definitely. And in addition to those changes, Microsoft has stopped servicing and providing updates to Windows XP. So having that software on your computer makes you vulnerable, as does the newer Windows 7. Microsoft last week discontinued servicing all Windows 7 applications. So now there's a problem for people who are still using it. A number of companies, a number of individuals still have Windows 7 on their computer, even though the current version of Windows operating system is Windows 10. So update your system. Make sure you're using the most recent operating system that's available for your computer. It will help protect you against fraud and scams, malware, viruses, in addition to any other software that you may have. So update the system. Second technology suggestion is that you purchase and install virus and malware protection. Now, the software for that is readily available from many companies. Before making a purchase, review those items, review what's available on the marketplace. It's very easy to do. There are a couple sites that do product reviews. One of them is something called CNET, and it's spelled out C-N-E-T. And if you go to www.cnet.com and then search for virus software or malware software reviews, you'll be able to see what they're saying and how they have evaluated that software. So consider that you need to get that regardless of what kind of computer you have. There used to be a sense that if you owned an Apple computer, you were immune. That is no longer the case. So whether you have an Apple or a PC, be sure to have the software protection that you need. You may also be concerned about the fact that this software has to be updated every year, which means purchasing a new license for it. Consider that this is insurance. Just as you would buy auto insurance, health insurance, home insurance, computer insurance is important. So purchasing virus and malware protection for under $100 in most cases is something very doable for many people, but it's something also that's very essential. Our final suggestion and resolution is utilize a virtual private network, a VPN. Now, this is software that you obtain to install on your computer, on your tablet, or on your phone. And it diverts your communications from those devices through a separate server that is encrypted and protected, instead of just using your technology to access the internet. Basically, it's a bypass. And so it makes it difficult for your signal, your communications to be tracked. And it also makes it difficult for scammers to be able to get into your personal data, because your data is now being routed somewhere else where they don't have access. So utilize a virtual private network. Again, you can go to the website CNET, and they evaluate VPNs on an annual basis. The list changes. They range in price each year. They're actually priced by the month, and the monthly fee may be as little as $5. It may be as much as $30 a month. Review what they have in terms of their offers. They provide different things. Some of them provide you with cloud storage. Others don't, but provide you with built-in malware protection. So check over what's being purchased when you buy a VPN. When you develop a password, be sure that your password is robust. Now, what is a robust password? Means a couple things, but one of them that it means is that the password be more complex than just simply a series of numbers. So having a password that is, let's say, the numbers 1 through 8, or maybe letters A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, would be a very weak password. A good password involves more than that. It involves upper and lowercase letters. it involves numerals, it involves symbols. So that makes the password become a better password. Also using a passphrase. What's a passphrase? An example might be to use a song title, and that becomes your passphrase. And much more difficult to break into if you are using that instead of just a typical 8-character password. Just another hint, and that is with passwords, most of the passwords we use are 8-character passwords. That's what a lot of websites require, a lot of places that we need to enter those passwords. If you have the opportunity to use a longer password, the longer the password, the more secure it is. Whether it's encrypted, whether it's not encrypted, a password of 16 characters rather than 8 will make that password much more difficult to break. In fact, the one recommendation that we've seen from some of the tech conferences that take place in the country are passwords should be as many as 32 characters. Now, very few people want to deal with that kind of number of items to type in each time they enter a website. But that would be the most secure at this time. The other thing you can do is purchase a password generator. There are several of them on the market, such as 1Password. And buying that and using it means you would create one really good password, set that for access, and then all your other passwords would be underneath that. So you wouldn't have them as loose items for you to use. You would have 1Password that provides you the access. So that's just another way to prepare your information so that it's safer and that the password is more meaningful than having just a series of numbers. Here's one more resolution that you can do in 2020 and actually accomplish after you've made the resolution. I know that sounds kind of strange because quite often we don't end up fulfilling that list of promises that we make to ourselves. But here's one that's very easy. I will register for fraud alerts. Now, fraud alerts are announcements that are made on either a regular or irregular basis by a number of organizations. They'll identify what the current fraud is and tell you what to be looking for and how to report it. Those organizations are listed in front of you, but they include AARP and our Fraud Watch network. If you register online for that, every week you will receive a notice that identifies a particular fraud or scam. The Better Business Bureau and the Federal Trade Commission will issue fraud alerts on a fairly regular basis, usually based on the volume of fraud reports of a particular fraud. Sometimes those are repeated alerts, sometimes they're unique or new. The National Consumers League and the Vermont Consumer Assistance Program also issue alerts on a fairly irregular basis. They don't seem to be on a specific date. They don't seem to be based on the number of alerts that come out, but usually they're issued on more of an emergency basis. But if you register for all 5 of these, and if you don't live in Vermont, you can check with your own state's Consumer Protection Department, see if they issue alerts. So if you don't live in Vermont, do that. If you do live in Vermont, use the one that is at uvm.edu/consumer, and that will put you in line for those alerts. Each of those websites have links to the alert formula, so you can simply go to the website, click on Send Alerts, or whatever their term is, and receive them. Now, this is something that can be done in probably 15 minutes. So if you want bragging rights, here's what your bragging right is. I accomplished my resolutions for 2020 in less than an hour.